Okay, let me refresh.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I am super excited about this particular live today. If you have not been joining me for the whole month of May, it has been Mental Health Awareness Month. And so this is my fourth chat. So I'm super excited to have Valon on here with us. And I'm going to allow her to go ahead and introduce herself. Also, if you have any questions, any comments, go ahead and put in the chat box so that we can address them. We are streaming on Facebook and on YouTube. So wherever you are watching us, go ahead and join us. This conversation is so much fun when we have people talking back with us. So again, welcome, Valon, and go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about what you do and who you are.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I want to start by saying that I am Valon Alford. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm based here in Durham, North Carolina. I am a graduate of Howard University School of Social Work,
Woo
HU.
woo.
So I am an LCSW, also a sex educator and sex therapist. And so I'm just really elated to be here. You want to give a little bit about like what I've done, or is that enough?
Yeah, so absolutely. So tell us a little bit more. So I'm always interested in what exactly is sex therapy, because I know a lot of people have different variations of what that means. So explain to us a little bit of how you got into this role and what do you do within this role?
Okay, so sex therapy is really a form of psychotherapy where the expertise is in sexuality and sexual health. Because it's such a taboo topic, a lot of people, like I've heard of sex doulas, there are a lot of professionals that incorporate different aspects of sexuality into their practices. And so some people are really misguided in terms of what sex therapy is, but it really is that branch of therapy that specializes in all things sexual health. So, not just focusing on dysfunction, but pleasure and the spectrum of sexuality and sexual health, such as gender identity, such as reproductive health, such as relationship and intimacy issues. So, I kind of like to say, even though this is not a full spectrum, but really when we think of like dysfunction all the way to maximizing pleasure, learning about kink, learning about things that even porn, talking about STIs, pregnancy, orgasms. So it really is talk therapy. There are no in-person demonstrations. There's no touching. We don't watch porn together. Try and think of some other things people have said, but it's none of that. A good sex therapist can help you maybe with recommendations on certain things or discussing those topics, but it really is in that place. But that's also why I was interested in sex education, because as a Black woman and mental health clinician, this stuff is so layered and nuanced. And so I find that, we all have our safe pockets of friends, groups, people from church, people from grad school, people from jobs, people from the neighborhood. And so when we get in those pockets, it's easier for me to come into a ladies' night or a sorority meeting or a men's group and just talk about orgasms or heart health and how it affects sexuality or sexuality period. And so I thought that sexual health, to the people who want to see me, I thought it was much more of a tangible way to access some of this information.
Right. So we have Mary. She has licky loo eyes, so hopefully she stays tuned in with us. I have my dad on here. He says, "Hey Tiff, am I on the wrong station?" I'm not sure. Are you on the right or the wrong station? We're talking about sex and perinatal therapy, which again, like you said, is a taboo conversation. A lot of times we don't want to talk about it, but being in the mental health field, these are things that we have to talk about and are serious issues within our particular community. So I'm glad that we are talking about it. So you have to determine if this is the right station for you or not.
Right. And that's what I tell everyone. It's a personal choice, right?
Right, exactly. So let's go a little bit. When you talk about different types of dysfunction, why might a person say, "Hey, Valon, I need to talk about this"? And before I get there, I love how you said that when we talk about myths or debunking myths about what is going to happen in this particular therapy, you're like, we're not doing all this extra stuff. This is literally a talk, but we are talking about certain things that are going on. So when you talk about dysfunction, what types of dysfunctions might people come and talk to you about?
So oftentimes people may come and they want to discuss things like erectile dysfunction. They may want to discuss anorgasmia. So if people are unable to experience an orgasm with sexual activity, oftentimes, and something we don't talk about is pain. So a lot of people experience pain during sex, especially intercourse. And so sometimes, especially for us Black women, we have, well, women in general, but some issues that predominantly affect us or disproportionately affect us, like fibroids. I had this conversation with one of my close girlfriends that it's really a quality of life issue. And so, sometimes we have these myths like pain is pleasure, or if it doesn't hurt, it's not good. And pain is pain, so
Right.
sometimes what, pain is pain. So where I come in is after you've done your battery of tests with a doctor, and sometimes people may come to us first, but generally after you've kind of worked with your doctor, they've ruled out some medical issues, or even if they ruled it in, right? Maybe you have a pelvic prolapse because you just had your fourth child, so you're experiencing some incontinence. It's making you self-conscious. It's affecting your sex life. And so that might be something where, you have this multi-systemic treatment plan. So you're talking with your doctor, maybe you're seeing a pelvic floor therapist, and then you're also kind of working on those intimacy issues. And so that's
before you go on, I think you touched on something important. You talked about pain not being pleasure. And I think that also goes back to the point where we have to know our bodies, right? If we don't know our bodies, and then we're coming into the situation with somebody else and they're thinking that it's okay, or we're thinking that it's okay, you have to know within your body, like, okay, something is not right. This doesn't feel good, something like that. And don't continue to go along with that and be like, oh, maybe this is how it's supposed to be. No, if there is something out of the norm, this is something that you should literally be checking out to see, okay, should I be going to the doctor? What should I be doing? Don't just accept things as though they are. Really go ahead and check it out and see what's going on.
Exactly. But the hard part is, like, it sounds like it makes sense to me, right? Like that makes sense. But keep in mind, like, again, these are things we don't talk about. You may have that one friend, and sometimes it's not even the person or the people that you have sex with that you feel most comfortable sharing these things with. And oftentimes, even with providers, I've been doing this series this past month with my colleague Jessica Ross. She's based in Michigan, and she's a LPC, and she's a board certified sex therapist. And we've been doing this series called Questions That Need Answers. And it's really, well, except for last week when we talked about child sexual abuse, but for the most part, it's just kind of us just flowing, vibing, talking all things sex. And, we talked about this, but it's a very uncomfortable topic for providers to bring up. And I was just telling her, we were saying, even when I go to the OBGYN, and no shade to any medical doctors, but like my GYN never asked me about pleasure. Like, she may ask me about, discharge, number of partners, but we don't talk about the quality of my sex life. We don't talk about pain. So it's kind of like,
oh, she balanced. She doesn't care about those things. I'm gonna tell you that now. She is not. Her job is like, okay, let me see what's medically wrong. All those different things are not going to occur. But that's something valid to bring up. Are they really what are they really focusing on?
Well, and this is the thing, because medically, it is medically, it's important, because if you're experiencing pain, the quality of your sex life could be an indicator. Like for men, for instance, if they're not asking you about the quality of sex life, and you don't say, oh, I'm having an issue, like erections are explicitly related to cardiovascular health and blood flow. So oftentimes, especially for men, if a man is experiencing any kind of sexual dysfunction where the impetus for him bringing it up might be pleasure. So that's the context he's bringing it up. Like, I'm just not, like, he may just say he's not having sex. But if you probe a little bit, or if you ask him, like, how is the quality of your sex? Like, how strong is your tumescence, which is, the quality of your erection? These are questions that do matter medically, because that can be an indicator for cardiovascular health. And as we know, as Black people, oftentimes we have to be active participants in our healthcare, because we have to advocate for extra testing. We have to advocate for, for certain procedures to be done, even though they may be standard or may be thought of to be standard. So when we say pleasure, I think, it is easy to think like, oh, like, that's, your doctor ain't got time for that. But it's like, we do need to bring these things into that, because they are medical issues. They can be medical issues.
Valon, let's go back a little bit. You said an important thought. You said that we are not comfortable with our own partners discussing this. Let's talk a little bit about that. Why do you think we are uncomfortable? So we're comfortable enough to possibly take our clothes off. We're comfortable enough to sleep in the same bed. We're comfortable enough to, eat together, whatever the case is. Where do you think we fail when it comes to being comfortable when we're talking about what is wrong or what is not wrong with our partners? Where do you think, is it communication? Is it like, where does that come from?
This sounds like a good book, Tiffany. Like, I need to think this out and write it down. It's like, it's a good book, because it's so, like, and that's really kind of what got us started with questions that need answers, because it's so much that's related. Like, most of the time we think about sex, we're thinking about actual intercourse. And that's pretty much it. And I remember last year I did this presentation with the North Carolina National Association of Social Workers. It was like a 1-hour lunch and learn, and it was sexual health for Black women beyond pregnancy, STIs, and pleasing men. And I just, like, for me, that title came so naturally, because when we have learned about sexual health, for me, it's mostly been in that context. Like, how do you prevent pregnancy? How do you prevent STIs? And how do you make sure your partner is pleased? And it's like, if that's our purview for sexual health, then, like, this thing is on me. Like, my vulva is mine. So I should be able to, have information and know that, my sexuality is everything about me being a woman, me having a cisgender identity, meaning that, I am female and woman, and I identify that way. I live that way. I'm heterosexual. I'm a voluptuous big woman. All of these things are part of our sexuality. So it's much broader than, are we having sex? Are we, being able to be sexually excited, or even arousal and desire? There's so much more to who we are as sexual beings. And I think that's where the deep issues start, because we don't really have the context to help us know. So I always mention, like, the Johari window. I think sometimes there are things about ourselves, like, okay, I know my areolas are big, or, like, there are things we know about ourselves, but, there are things that other people know about us, things that they don't know about us, and things that none of us know even about myself. And so it's kind of like, there's communication stuff, there is sexual trauma, there are things going on in the world, there's parenthood, working jobs, and so all of these things are part of our experiences as sexual beings. And so I think we have to first, like, just really broaden what it means to be a sexual being. Or when we say, well, we're going to talk about sex, it's not necessarily like, let me give you the top 10, positions or something like that.
Right. That I think you're touching on some good stuff, because I think you are right. I think when you hear the words, if we were to ask the audience right now, if anybody's watching this, what comes to mind when you hear the word sex? And I think, Valon, you mentioned a couple of those things. You talked about pleasure and the positions and different things like that. But like you said, it goes so much deeper. And so when we talk about going so much deeper, you have to want to even be in the mood. But because there are things going on, for example, we can even segue into a little bit about what's going on in the world today.
Yeah.
If we think about what's going on in the world, if I'm sad about something, I just posted a story on my Facebook page where I talked about my experience yesterday. And the experience was, hey, I saw somebody, I'm driving down the street, going to the store, and I see some police officers arresting a black man, right? And there's two people on the side, and they have to take out their camera to record, and they have to watch to make sure that everything's okay. So if I'm feeling this way, and then I go on to talk about my dad's experience with, having a gun held to him by the police officers, with my little sister in the car, and different things like that. So if we're experiencing this, that really, I had started crying a bit, because I thought, wow, this is the world that we're living in. So if we are experiencing these things, how is that going to affect my particular sex life during this particular time? If I am sad about a situation or sad about the world's current events, how is that going to affect what is going on in the bedroom? So what are your thoughts about these world current events as it relates to those things?
Yeah, well, I mean, the things that are going on in the world right now are despicable. And I think that many of us are affected in various ways. And so sexually, how we may see this, manifesting is that some people may want to have more sexual activity. Oftentimes, I feel like sex itself, whether it's, intercourse, anal, digital, whatever, I feel like a lot of times sex kind of gets a bad rap in terms of, if people are having sex to relieve stress, it's a bad thing. It is absolutely not a bad thing. It really is the context. It's not an absolute, like if you are stressed and you have sex, that's bad coping. And it's like, no, much like if you had a drink, or if you went on a walk, or if you took a hot bath or a massage. It's really sort of, I even hate to say in moderation, but it really just depends on the context, right? Like some people may want to relieve stress that way. Other people may be feeling more anxious, more depressed, more stressed, and that could really affect their desire. And so, or their arousal. Maybe they think that they want to have sex, so they feel a desire, but they're not aroused. And that's maybe because of the mind-body connection. So, just your body is just not responding that way because the body keeps, right? So you may have been consuming a lot of news, watching what's been happening, watching the protests as they unfold. And so really a lot of that could be held in internally. And so I think that there are a lot of different ways sexually that we may be seeing some people sort of cope with everything that's going on.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. So basically it can go either way. So they could maybe want to do stuff more. They're just saying, nah, I'm not feeling it. Okay, so it really depends. I like the way that we put that, because not one person reacts the same to everything. So I feel like that definitely, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, just with like even grief and loss, or anxiety and depression. But I'm really thinking about grief, right? Like sometimes people may lose a significant person in their life, and maybe they want to be around other people. They want to not be alone. They want to, spend all their waking moments surrounded by people. And other people may kind of go more introverted. They may want to spend time alone. And it's not well, this is right or this is wrong. It's sort of how we would tell anyone else, like, we kind of keep an eye on it. Like, are you spending all of your time alone? Are you afraid to spend any time alone? So it's really kind of just knowing that we all, the human experience is dynamic, and there are differential responses to the things that we experience.
Right. Absolutely. Those are some good points. I want to shift a little bit to sexual trauma. You mentioned sexual trauma. So when we think about sexual trauma, what types of trauma is occurring when you think about that? And then the second part of my question is, I know we often focus on women when it comes to sexual trauma. I think we will focus on rape or child molestation, whatever the case is. But I really want to pinpoint and talk about men and their sexual trauma and how that affects their relationship. So Where do you want to start? Which question
Ooh,
we want to go with?
girl. I'm gonna start with the last part, I guess, and then you can kind of help me go back to the beginning. But with men and sexual trauma, we actually did one our questions that need answers last Tuesday on live, and Jessica and I really kind of defined what is. Well, we were talking about child sexual abuse, but really, and this was inspired. Many of you probably saw the video. So rapper Lil Boosie made this live post well, I think the post was old, but it sort of resurfaced and blew up a few weeks ago. But he basically was talking about the fact that he had paid for a grown woman to perform oral sex on his 12-year-old son and his nephew. And
Right.
so Jessica and I both have professional experience working in child welfare. And so we really just wanted to call a spade a spade. Like, that was wrong. That is child abuse. And it's
Right.
traumatic because, not only, what he said and the willful ignorance to sort of boast about it, but really the reception from certain people, in the community, like, oh, because he was like, he's making a man out of them and all of this stuff. And even the things that we don't have to call trauma for it to be traumatic to us. And I think that, especially as a Black person, because there are a lot of things that we may have experienced, witnessed, heard about, learned about, and mentally, we may do things a certain way, we may hold certain values. Physically, we may experience ulcers, we may be having migraines and headaches. And so you may not call that relationship when you were 15 and the other person was 26 traumatic, but it has affected you, I guarantee it. And I think for a lot of young Black males, um I know a lot of people personally and professionally, men who have said that they were assaulted, and they don't typically use that word, but they had sexual interactions with older adult women as youth. And so I think we don't talk about that, right? Like, often we'll think about like how nasty, or how wrong it is for grown men to look at young girls and things like that. But with our Black boys, and so it's 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime, sexually abused. And so, and like Jessica and I were talking last week, every 9 minutes a child is sexually abused. So we just
Wow.
we don't always talk about these
We
things.
really don't. And I did see the little Boosie story, and it's amazing how people actually think about different things. And so I think if you switched it to a girl, had he taken his daughter to something like that, then I think people would be up in arms. But because it's a boy, it's okay to do these particular things. And the problem is, I feel like somebody did that to little Boosie, and that's what he was taught. And so he feel like, let me do my kids like that. And then is the trend going to continue? Or are we going to say, no, we're going to stop this particular thing? And again, it's amazing how you get to see how people are on social media. You get to see how really people are and what they think about it. And why would you think that that particular thing is okay? Like I said, if the roles were reversed or something like that, or again, like you said, what if somebody took your child to that particular place? Would you be okay with that? And I feel like we have to allow people to, especially children, I don't feel like we need to rush them into anything. They have so much going on in life. That is one thing that they don't need to be worried about at this particular age. Who needs to be worried about a stripper? I don't know how old they were. If they were 12, 11, whatever the case is, we got so much going on that is like the least of our worries. And so I think it is important to talk about the sexual trauma with men. And I think because, like, let's say when they get into these relationships, are they comfortable with doing things because things have happened to them? Or how do we recognize, like you said, that it's assault because they're not using that particular word? How do I make the realization, oh shoot, this was not supposed to happen to me? Then how do we deal with that and take care of that versus bringing that into our next relationship? So as a woman, if my guy may, and let's say my guy may not want to have sex, and I'm thinking, dang, he don't want me? But in reality, not realizing that there could literally be something wrong that he doesn't even recognize or may recognize and not feel comfortable and talk about it. So these are the things that we have to look at. And I guess I'm going to have to say, I thank God for my background in social work, because my background in social work allows me to think past the surface level. I think a lot of times if I let's say if I see a teenager that has an attitude, most people are gonna say, oh, I can't deal with her, she has an attitude. Sometimes I say that too, but I also think about, okay, what happened to her today? What did something happen before she came to school? Did something happen at the home last night? What happened? So we have to really look at past the surface when we are in these relationships, and when it comes to that sexual part of our relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of those things where it's like I said, oftentimes people are not using these words. I'm using these words because I'm a clinician. And I think that when we call things by what they are, we give people context and permission to say, like last week, we spent a lot of time just going over, like we define, like we differentiate abuse and neglect and child maltreatment and different forms of sexual abuse and sexual coercion. And I think when you start learning, like, oh, there is a name for that, like, oh, okay, that's child abuse, then I think it gives us power. And so, it's I think even in times where, because people may come to sex therapy or therapy, like it could just be like everything, like the presenting issue is sort of broad sometimes. Like it can be like everything is just annoying me lately, or I can't focus on anything. Like the things I care about things, but I'm just over it. So this is where you come in with, right? But then we start talking about all these things, and it's, oh, you're annoyed because like you're homeschooling the kids, and you're working from home, and your partner like wants you to cook dinner every day and have sex 4 times a week, and you're doing Zoom calls, and you're making sure kids have their homework done, and you're just exhausted. And so you really start parsing out things, then you learn, I think, in therapy, something that usually is illuminated is sort of triggers, right? Like it may just be like every time, like it could be a scent, it can be an action, like, every time I, come to bed in negligee, like I'm thinking I'm turning on my partner, and he is just like, he doesn't want to have sex, or he or she is just like, they don't have sex. And then you really start unpacking things, or we doing couples therapy, and somehow it comes out that, like, when I was younger, like, I was forced to watch someone, in this particular, like, wear negligee. And I never really realized that was that's why I shut down when she does it. But, in these relationships, I think where therapy is helpful is we help people to sort of see all the things that they have going on in their head. And we help them put it all on this imaginary board. And then we start putting things in categories and spaces and linking, like, oh, okay, like, because you said this had nothing to do with that, but I remember when you said this, it also kind of went back to that story you said. And so we're connecting those dots, right? So, they come in, like, every time when I talk to him, I'm like, well, was it this? Was that? He's like, I don't know. And then, so, you really are working with it, like, because it's really a ball of yarn, right? Like, I don't make a design out of the yarn that people come into the office with. Like, I help them untangle the ball.
Right. And that's good when we talk about therapy in general. I think a lot of people, especially in our communities, I'm going to say the Black and Brown communities, the way we think about therapy is in a negative fashion. I'm crazy. I don't want to go. They're going to think of me this way. There's something wrong with me. And I think we have to really understand the purpose of therapy. The purpose of therapy is to give us clarity. It's not even for the therapist to give us all the answers, but it's really to break down these particular walls that we have. And like you said, you may not even recognize something. Or if somebody is talking about, I don't even do therapy, but Valon, I have a course called Increasing Your Confidence. And so when I was doing a one-on-one with my student, we were talking about something. He's like, dang, Tiffany, I didn't even, he's like, this is a therapy session. I said, well, I'm not a therapist, but the fact that when we are working through these particular things, it began to bring stuff back to his remembrance. He like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that until you kind of mentioned that, because we were talking about trauma. And so I was like, yes, this is what therapy is all about. It's all about just, it's a release. It's allowing yourself to release something. And I think sometimes people may be scared of therapy because they are afraid of what's going to be unleashed. I think about when we talk about alcohol. I don't drink alcohol, but I know one of the there's a couple reasons why I don't drink. But I know one of the reasons why I particularly was like, I ain't doing it, because they say that you get real honest when you drink. And I said, oh shoot, I can't be vulnerable.
Like your own honesty.
Right. I said, they don't gonna tell it what's coming from my head to my mouth and out into my actions. So I said, oh, let me stay away from that.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to be vulnerable. And so that's what reminds me of therapy. When you go to therapy, you have to begin to really look at yourself. And a lot of people don't want to be honest with who they are and what they are and what they are doing. But honestly, we all need it. Okay. And you as a therapist yourself, I was reading, or there's this book out where it's talking about therapists going to see therapists. We all have to unpack.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Yeah, that's good practice.
Exactly. And so I think it's really important to recognize what it is, but I think we all should want to be better, right? And I think all of us wanting to be better is then making these connections in this relationship. There is no point of two broken people are together. How are we going to make one whole thing? We can't. We're just breaking up, and then the prerequisite to having a kid is sex. That's all you need. There ain't no rule book. There ain't no say, oh, you got to have a perfect score in high school, a perfect credit score. It is, none of those are criteria. And unfortunately, we have people that are parents that probably don't need to be, right? And the ones that are there can't have children, but that's a whole nother discussion. We're just going to keep it on this particular topic. But I think that it's funny that these things that we really don't necessarily look at. So moving on a little bit, or shifting to something else, more, we're still talking about sexual trauma. Let's talk about marriage and rape. What are your thoughts on marriage and rape? What do you consider? And what I'm thinking about, because I see your face.
I'm like, oh, okay, we're going there. Okay. Right.
Because we are talking about it all, okay?
Okay, all right.
What I'm thinking about we assume, right? We assume that if you're married that you are supposed to have sex, right? Which is, I agree with that statement, right? I think it's a very important aspect of the relationship. But at the same time, you kind of mentioned, if I don't want to do something and my partner does, what do you consider, or is it possible to be raped within a marriage and in your relationship?
So the answer is yes. You definitely can be raped by a spouse. Technically, yes. Legally, I don't believe that all 50 states, that it is illegal in all 50 states. I will fact check that, but I don't think that it is fully illegal for a spouse to rape their partner in certain states. But
that's interesting. I didn't even think about the states and the law. Yeah. Okay, that's a whole nother story. Because I was like, that's
a
crazy.
Whole other ball game.
Right.
Like, there are a lot of laws that are on the books in certain places that I think in North Carolina, they still have a lot of anti-gay laws on the books. Like, if I'm not mistaken, anal sex is illegal in North Carolina. So when these laws came about, and I forget the name of them, there's another name other than anti-gay, but when they came about, this was really targeting the gay community, right? But one, how do you enforce that? And so it's one of those, it's an interesting juxtaposition of, well, obviously nobody is enforcing that. So it's with all the things going on in the world, that's not something we need to kind of give a lot of attention to. But I'm always of the mindset, if something is a law, it is enforceable, whether they're doing it or not. So it's kind of these are some things that sort of need to be undone and repealed. But nonetheless, there are a lot of antiquated, prejudicial laws related to sexuality and sexual health. So I know RAINN, it's RAINN. It's like the Rape and Incest Network, national network. They have like a link on their website where you can put in your state and you can get laws on consent, on basically a lot of different things related to sexual health. And so that might be a good place to check. But in general, I mean, when you are made to participate in sexual acts that you do not give consent to, whether it's your priest, your husband, wife, mom, dad, cousin, uncle, big brother, big sister, neighbor, stranger, it is sexual assault, rape. It may fall into some of those other categories and titles. So yes, you certainly can, but I think relationships, it gets so complicated when you say that. I mean, on the one hand, it is what it is, and then also you kind of wonder, like, well, not what was the context in terms of right or wrong, but sort of, in those relationships. Because if nothing else, it's intimate partner violence, right? And we see sexually, that's one way that it may manifest. Like, because a lot of times people think of domestic violence as, somebody blackening their partner's eye, but it could be forced sex. It could be, withholding access to the bank accounts. It could be name calling. Like, there are a lot of different masks that it wears. So yeah, to answer your question, you absolutely can be raped by a spouse.
And forced sex, in my opinion, would be just simply if I say no. If I could be the one to initiate something and I say no, whatever, at any point during that time, regardless of how far we're into it or whatever the case is, it could still be, that would be considered forced sex, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yep. So that's interesting. We've talked about that before, and some people say no just because they're in a marriage, and it's like, wait, hold on, let's really examine the whole thing and see what that says. But that is the reason why we are out here educating and different things like that.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know that sometimes, like some faith-based communities might talk about, a spouse's body belonging to the other and things like that. But it is what it is. It is sexual assault. So.
And I think that is within a context. We have to really look at that. Yes, the Bible may talk about that, but we also have to think about the extra piece that goes along with that. And like you said, then that would be the come in where it's like, if I say no, I say no, regardless of if our bodies belong to each other, because we are within the context of marriage. And so it's important to talk about those different things as well. So another thing that you mentioned was intimacy. So tell me, what is intimacy? How does it begin? How do we get it? Where does it come from? What are things that we can do in order to create this sense of intimacy with our partners?
Oh, okay. This is another good book. I'm going to rewatch this later. So I can be like, okay, what was that first book? What's my second book? Intimacy to me is really, intimacy is how we connect to other people, right? Like, it's a space of being vulnerable and letting people into not just our bodies, but truly personal spaces. And so, and like that could be mentally, emotionally, as well. And so we cultivate intimacy. Let me just go back. Intimacy is not limited to sexual relationships, right? Like, we get intimacy from close relationships. So, that could be a friendship, that could be, a coach, it could be a different family member. But I think when we think about romantic intimacy, again, that's not just limited to sex, but that really is just sharing things. And I think, again, when we talk about sex and sexual health, intimacy is not just like, oh, I only do these certain sex acts with this partner because I care so much. It is, sharing your dreams, your frustrations, your hopes, sharing, even your failures, like, just as that to me, it's more or less like taking off the mask. And so one way, and it's sort of like generic, or I would say it's probably more cliche because of like how common it is, sort of how mindfulness has gotten wrapped up in the cliche of the world. But the five love languages is always a recommendation of mine for people to read that book. And I think it's helpful to know your love language, whether you're single, you've been married 35 years. It's a good book to read, but also there's a quick quiz on their website that you could take. And I always encourage people to actually take the quiz, because I was one of those people like, oh, I know the five love languages. I know which one mine is. And I was wrong. So the five love languages are words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, gifts. Did I say them all? Words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, gifts. It's another one. Dang, it's gonna come to me. But so the five love languages, for me, when I took the quiz, it was just like, because I would have said mine would have been quality time and then physical touch. But when I took the quiz, physical touch was first, and then quality time was secondary. And I was surprised at that, because I was like, okay, like that's weird. But when I thought about it, I'm like, I am a hugger. I'm gonna pat you on the back, like, hey girl, I am like, give me some sugar. I am like, I want to sit very close to you and watch this movie kind of person. Like, why you got to be over there?
Right. Okay, wait, Valon, did you say, so it was words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and then physical touch?
I think I left off acts of service. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for that.
I love the five love languages. So if they have the quiz so we have a question really quickly. I'm going to get to your question in 1 second, Ebony Eyes. Mine's is quality time. Like, I feel like when you want to spend quality time with me, whether it's hanging out, whether it's sitting in the house, like that shows me that you love me, right? Whereas, and I think it's important when we talk about the love languages, just because that's the way I like to be loved, I need to pay attention to how my partner likes to be loved. So although I want quality time, if he wants physical touch, I have to be able to say, how can I show him love? There is an app. Oh my God, I can't think of the app. I'm going to find it. There's an app where it's related to the love languages, but basically it's like, it's a tank. So if my love tank gets low, my partner has my love tank and I have his. So we're
wow.
And so if my tank is low, then my partner should be able to go ahead and address those needs. And if we're addressing the needs together, then we both get that type of love that we want. But it has to be this type of equal type of thing. I think that's what's important about the love language. And I actually love them. And then, like you said, when you take the quiz, you really think, oh, okay, this is actually really true of what I like. Like you said, you recognize something that you didn't even think about. So we have a question on the table. It says, what happens when either male or female experiences too early? How do you think in any way it can or would affect his or her next partner relationship? Professional opinion and not personal.
Oh, dang. Okay. So, okay, wait. So what happens when either the male or female experiences too early? Do you mean early?
So I think... Okay, so they said this goes back to something we mentioned earlier. If I'm thinking correctly about what they're saying that we mentioned earlier, I want to go back to yes, I want to go back to the little Goosey situation, low key, almost about that reference. So let us know, Ebony, as if that's the situation that you're talking about. So does it make the question clear?
Well, and I'll just get started. And if she has any more clarification, just let me know. But I think that again, it's one of those, and I hate to, because to me, I'm like, I know I was always that skeptic, like, okay, she's saying the same stuff, but really, there could be two people who experience their first sexual activity at 12, and somebody could be very hypersexual, very sexually assertive, very comfortable with what they want. It could help them in a way. I shouldn't say help. They could just have a higher self-awareness regarding what they like sexually, because they may have had more or varied sexual experiences stemming from that early onset sexual activity. Whereas another person may have had early sexual activity and really it's led to anxiety, depression, maybe substance use because of the maladaptive coping or just the only way that they knew. So maybe, I talk to a lot of people like, oh, my man smokes, like 4 blunts a day, but, like he don't have no problem. Like he ain't on no serious drugs. And it's just like, oh, okay, like, and there's, oh, we live in DC or we live in Cali, like it's legal, or he has like it's prescribed. And it's just like, oh yeah, but like 4 a day, you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like, it really could just depend. And I think it's not as much the early piece. I mean, it's early does matter. Like if a child is sexually assaulted at 4, it could have affected, like if they have had some vaginal trauma or trauma to their vulva, it could have affected their physical development along with their mental health. So it's not necessarily just early, but it really just sort of depends on
what type of experience it was. Wouldn't you say? I think, like you said, I think it would depend on that particular experience. Like you said, if something happened, I've heard stories where people say I was sexually molested as a child, like boys, I was sexually molested as a child. And now my experience is I don't particularly like women, even though it was a traumatic experience, right? Or you have situations where, like you said, was it a boyfriend, girlfriend partner where it's something that you liked and you were able to explore. And so you go into a relationship feeling like, okay, I know what I want sexually, versus saying, okay, my uncle did this to me and this was something that was not a pleasure. So yes, it absolutely could affect. And like you said, I think it depends on the person. It could affect them negatively, right? Where you're saying, okay, well, I'm going to go out and get as many sexual partners as I can, or I'm not going to date anybody at all. So I really, like you said, I think it really depends on that particular experience and not just that it was too early.
Yeah. And I mean, and also like, it just depends too on the context of that experience, because if you were 14 and your first sexual experience was with your 14-year-old boyfriend who was also in the 8th grade, that's going to be very different than if you were 10 and your stepdad assaulted you, or if you were gang raped at, 8 behind the school, and also depending on what happened, like if you told someone, if the person who assaulted you was prosecuted, if, again, like I said, if it was like some sexual activity amongst young children, like you were young, the other person was young, and you were, it just really kind of depends on the context, because say if it was your pastor or your uncle or your stepfather, that really impacted beyond that activity itself. So, maybe the way things were in your household, maybe it affected not only your relationship with that person, but with your mom as well, with, or it stopped you from doing things. Or oftentimes, because in my professional work today, I work with a lot of athletes, and although in my full-time role, I don't work with them as their therapist, I help them get connected to therapists, but it could very well be that, this thing happened to someone and it really thrusted them into sports, right? Like, that was my safe place. That was my space to get away from everything. That was my space to not have to deal with the crap that was going on at home. So a lot of times, different experiences will manifest themselves in people in different ways. And so I hate to kind of be so global, because I know I'm always that person like, okay. But really, that is what it is, because there's such a varied experience. So I would say if it's something you have experienced, our partner, I really would just kind of begin to think about ways that, like, if it's for your partner, because sometimes the people that we love, we begin to get insight about them just off of how we interact with them. And one thing that I have learned as a clinician and a woman, I don't know how much is which one, but it's like, I will see things about a person. I'm like, Tiffany don't even know, you know what I'm saying? Like, she said that, she's projecting from that situation that happened at her old job over here to, homegirl about this trip to Ghana, and she ain't did nothing to her. You may be, in your mind, you like, nope, like that's in that box, that's in that box. Like nothing has anything to do with each other. And I've learned that I just have this gift of discernment. So I know right off the bat, like even if you're not ready to accept it, I know that those things are connected. And oftentimes, especially in relationships, we start learning things about our partner and we will see like he always says, it has nothing to do with each other, but I know that like, this is because of how things were with his mom or. And so we have to balance sort of the information that we receive and perceive with also because your insight about someone else can be very helpful, but it's also pointless at the same time. Like if that makes sense, it's helpful in understanding the dynamics of that relationship, but for as much insight as you have for someone else, they have to have it and work it into their psyche and work it into, okay, now what do I do with it? And so that's why I always tell people too, therapy is good. I know there are a lot of barriers, but that's the good safe space. Throw it out there. You have a good professional wrangler, for lack of a better word. But you can really kind of unpack a lot of
What's
these
going on?
things.
Right, valid. Okay, so let's talk about this before we even get to this intimacy with other, because I feel like we've jumped the gun. Let's
Okay.
roll it back a little bit. We've
Okay.
jumped the gun with talking about sex and relationships with others. But what about the relationship with ourselves? How do we begin to work on ourselves before we even enter these types of relationships? And a lot of times we enter relationships because of sex, right? So if I'm feeling some type of way, my body wants the craving of another human being, I enter into this sex relationship, could turn into a relationship. And then again, but we're still moving into these two broken people. So how do we begin to work on ourselves before we enter a relationship? And should we enter into these relationships without working on ourselves, or should we attempt to work on ourselves before we seek out a relationship or before others seek us out in a relationship? It's a loaded question. I'm sorry.
So I think that I would answer this question differently, depending on, personally or professionally.
Okay.
But my gut reaction is, it is loaded. This is the thing, right? I think on the one hand, I think that, therapy is super helpful, especially as a therapist. And I think, and not even just therapy, but this whole awareness thing, right? Like focus on yourself. Like me, I'm in my mid-30s, I'm single, no kids. And I feel like the things that I used to hear in my 20s are not helpful for me as a single woman in my 30s now. Like, work on you. Don't worry about these men. Get your career, get your house, get your this. And it's like, check, 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 check.
Right.
Now what? You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So I
right,
feel like sometimes we get so used to throwing that out. And it's like, you could be Mother Teresa. Like, I think they're not mutually exclusive. Like, I think that, and sometimes, and I know myself, and I've had like, my group chats have been popping because it's sort of like we feed women, especially Black women, we feed each other society at large, but we feed this like, do you be great, like things will happen for you. And then when they don't, it's sort of like, well, what do you do? It's not like, oh, well, I'm making good money. I have advanced degrees. And so I think that there is a fine line because you want to be self-actualized, right? Like you want to know who you are, know what you want, know the things that are deal breakers for you versus the things that are negotiable, versus even just knowing objectively, like these are signs of an unhealthy relationship. These are signs of an abusive relationship. These are things that happened in my past relationships, and this is what I really enjoyed. These are the things that I didn't realize at the time made me annoyed or frustrated or made me feel less than, or, now I realize I compromised myself in ways that I wouldn't do anymore going forward. And so I think that there's a balance of, don't make things a priority. Don't, you want to be in a good place and put the best version of yourself forward. But I also feel like oftentimes we're doing that. Most people are actively trying to do that. And I think maybe if you're stuck sometimes after trauma, loss, and grief, a major transition doesn't necessarily have to be traumatic, but maybe you just started grad school, maybe you just finished grad school, maybe you just had a baby, maybe you just went through a divorce. Like, I think there are times when it may be best to not prioritize a relationship. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that, like, oh, should you get your stuff together? Because the irony is, and I'm having this conversation with a lot of single women in their 30s and 40s, is myself is so together that now people are saying, girl, the bar is too high. Like, who you
Right.
gonna, you want him to be making six figures and no kids? And it's like, girl, he's 40. Like, he got three kids, and he been working, at this factory for 10 years. Like, he not making your money because he didn't go to college, but he's making decent money. So then it's sort of flip flop, like, oh, you got the bar too high. Like, oh, well, people gonna have, it's even not even like money and education now, but it's sort of like, oh, I mean, people gonna have some stuff with them. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't have little issues or whatever. Like, and so I hear this a lot too. So I just think that I am.
That's funny that you talk about that within the context of our age, right? Our age makes a difference, like you said. And when we were and I talk about that in terms of life goals, right? Because in our 20s, we were in grad school. We were doing this and we were getting ourselves, quote unquote, together. I think that's a reality, right? Okay, so what do I do now that I've got the college out of the way? What do I do now that I got my career going? So how do we go to kind of like the next phase of life, right? And then when we're in our 30s and 40s, is it harder today? I don't know. Like you said, where are the men at? If we're looking for if that's what your preference is, are we looking for Black men? You know what I'm saying? Or are we saying, okay, are we going to date outside our race? And what does that look like? Are we looking at the credit scores? You know what I'm saying? Did this guy make a mistake? And so his credit score is not too good. So am I going to opt him out of it? And then also talking about his mental health. I need to know. I think before the criteria was, how much money he made, what kind of car drive. But now I'm asking about that mental health. Okay. Do you got bipolar yourself or is somebody in your family? I need to know these things because if we have kids, this could be hereditary, right?
And and I would say too, to add to that, I don't. Yeah, the diagnosis, I want to know that, but like, I want to know because, like, maybe you suffer from depression, right? Maybe you are an anxious person. I want to know, what do you do about it? And they don't have to be like, oh, I see my therapist once a week, because as a therapist, I know people who have been in therapy for years. They have not changed their behavior. Right. They refuse to change, anything about themselves. And therapy is sort of their pass for, it's sort of, I won't say a tool of manipulation, but people are like, oh, I'm in therapy, or my therapist says, but they don't ever do what the therapist suggests or offers. And so it's like, no, I want to know, like, okay, if you, have major depression, or, and let's just be real. A lot of dudes you date, they won't know their mental health stuff. They ain't been to nobody. They talk at the barbershop. They may have an aunt that they talk to, few times a year, for certain family events, and they kick it and they talk a few hours about life and stuff. And that's it. They're not going to be like, oh, I'm, diagnosed with bipolar 1 and I'm on, LICSW, and more than likely, probably not.
That's a good point. You're right. Some people don't even know about their mental health status and how things are affecting them. We have a comment that says, find Jesus. This is an answer from a man of the cloth. There will be plenty of time for everything else. So to that comment, I would have to say, what if I have found Jesus? What if I got the career? I done found Jesus. I'm in church. I'm saved. And the man still has not come. What do we do at that point? We'll continue. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, we'll continue our discussion, and I want this person to answer that question. What if we have found Jesus and we're still waiting on that man And we've been done prayed about it. Lord, send me this husband.
Praise God, because and I left that off, but many of these conversations are happening in my church group chats and my good Christian woman group chats. Like, and I would say just as a person, that doesn't matter, like just straight up. But especially in these things where you're believing God for a spouse and all that, and it's like you can, and I want to say this: you can love God in Jesus and love yourself and be full of the Holy Spirit and yearn for human connection, for a relationship. That does not mean your faith is not high enough or not substantial, or that you lack faith, or that it's lustful.
Right. At the end of the day, Valon, we are human beings. Like, it is what it is. We don't live in a spiritual being. We live in a human body, and then we are connected to the spirit. So absolutely, these things are definitely going to, these are natural feelings that we have, and it's okay to have these particular feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm so grateful for, a church community, and at least, my friends within that community. We can have real conversations like that, because I think my turnoff, and a lot of millennials, turnoffs to Christianity, and I won't go all the way there today, but I think that sometimes religiosity, not spirituality, but I think sometimes it really is a tool for us to deflect, to really kind of not go there with human experiences. And there are several instances in the Bible, and that's the one I can speak to, but there are several instances where it talks about us having human experiences, right? Like, we have free will, there are connections in different relationships, there are different types of relationships. And so I think that there, even spiritually, there is an understanding that we have these human experiences. And so I definitely think that, it is a good recommendation, if you are closer with a higher power, like whoever or whatever that is for you, it can definitely help you as a person. But it does not mean that you lack that if that's something you still yearn for or want in your life.
Right, but
not saying that person was saying that.
Right, God created, at the end of the day, let's put it out there, God created sex. Like, he created this. He created within a different confinement. As we're talking about religion, he created this within the confinements of your spouse or your the person you marry. But at the end of the day, he created sex. So sex is out there. He wants us to have sex. There is nowhere in the Bible where it says he doesn't. It's when we talk about religion, it's in the context of what it's in the context of. But at the end of the day, this is something that he knew that we needed. He knew that.
Well, I always say, look, there are 8,000 nerve endings in the clitoris, right? That's double the nerve endings that are in a penis. And if we believe that God created the heaven and earth and everything in between, he created the clitoris. The clitoris is literally the only body part that has a sole purpose of pleasure. It has no other function. It's not there to regulate hormones. The sole purpose is pleasure. Like, he made this thing on women for us to experience pleasure. So I think that, all that to say, my point is, you can love God and be sold out for Jesus and still want a human companion relationship. And it doesn't mean that, one lessens the other.
Right, absolutely. One thing that we didn't get into, we titled this sex and perinatal therapy. So let's talk a little bit about that type of therapy, because we did not get into that. So
okay,
explain to us what that is and what that means, because we are already within an hour. Valon, can you believe we're already an hour within this?
Girl, time flies when you're having fun.
But we are let's touch on this subject for a couple minutes and just let us know what that is and what does that exactly mean.
Okay, so perinatal mental health is really mental health that deals with or that focuses on women who are pregnant and up to the first year after they've given birth. And so, and I like to be inclusive of also women who are trying to conceive, who may have experienced pregnancy loss and infertility. So it's really, this particular group of women. And so, what we globally used to refer to as postpartum depression really is called PMAD. So we talk about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which really could range from anxiety, depression, different manifestations of anxiety like OCD. And OCD with the perinatal population might not be that what was that MTV show where it used to be like, oh, True Life, like True Life, I have OCD. And, they would just show people, or it's like, oh, True Life, I'm a hoarder. And so it would just be these very stereotypical kind of like, you're going out of back and forth out of the door 5 times. You have to count. You have to wash your hands for 6 minutes. And it's like, with the perinatal population, OCD might be, I have a fear that everything is contaminated with germs. So I breastfeed, but I don't bottle feed because I feel like my breast milk will get contaminated. It will harm my baby. My baby will die. And so, that kind of leads from the anxiety. And because you have such great fear and anxiety from that, oftentimes you see anxiety and depression. And then we even see sometimes psychosis and psychotic features. So I really got into this work when I was working at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and I was the social worker in the pediatric clinic. And I always tell people I saw a lot less children in the pediatric clinic because, what you learn as a social worker is children are sort of the scapegoat of the family. You may have some true, 8-year-old is, you may have a behavioral issue oftentimes with children, and that's the presenting problem, right? Like my 8-year-old won't sit still in school. The teacher thinks he has ADHD. They need an evaluation, or my 8-year-old is, or whomever, is acting out or hitting people. So you may have this behavioral impetus that gets people to a referral. But I'm always curious, and I always say, well, what's home like? And working with the military could be, dad or mom is deployed. We just had a new baby. We're separated from our family. But oftentimes I would always do my first visit with the parent, whoever was available. Oftentimes it was mom. And then also in the pediatric clinic, they would see babies post-delivery. So most of the time at the 2-week appointment, they would screen the moms when the babies came in for their well baby visit. So they would give them an Edinburgh postnatal depression scale. And so from that EPDS, it would indicate symptoms of anxiety and depression. So if they scored over a 10, I think the highest score is a 30, but anything over a 10 would warrant a referral to the social worker. And I would often see the moms, and that would lead us into therapy. And so a lot of moms, I think it's 1 in 7, will experience postpartum depression or PMAD. So
Valon, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I used to work at an organization where I was working with pregnant African American women. That was a whole program, and so I really enjoyed that program. I was a group facilitator there, and so we would have this 10-week session. We're talking about pregnancy, relationship, intimacy, when the baby's born, all these different things. And I really, really enjoyed the group just to be around them. I don't have children like you, Valon, so we don't have children. So we're also learning from these women as well. And so it was really cool to see the things that are occurring in the body during this particular time. And I think a lot of people do not mention the depression after having a baby, because you assume that baby is a joyous time. You're supposed to be happy, different things like that. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I feel a certain type of way. And you feel even embarrassed to even tell people that you're not as happy-go-lucky as you should be, because you have this baby bouncing, boy or girl. And so I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if you saw, do you watch Netflix? There's a show called Working Moms. Have you seen that show before?
No, I have not.
Okay, so you have to go back and watch it. It's about 4 episodes, but it talks about the different things that women go through after they have children. So there's a lot going on in it. There's one therapist that ends up getting pregnant right after 9 months. There's a lawyer who's like, I really want to go back to work. There's another one who her depression is very evident in the beginning of the show. She almost wants to like commit suicide, but it's not in like this, I want to get a gun to my head. She like goes in the back of her pool and kind of goes in, and the people that she's a real estate agent, so the people that are coming look in the house see her in the back of the pool. But when she's committing suicide, she's like feeling stress relief in this pool. So it's not this imaginative way that we think of suicide. And so I was like, wow, this is and it's very comical and humorous. So you got to watch it. You got to tell me what you think about it. Because I think,
thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, you'll definitely relate to some of your clients that you usually be like, oh, okay, I see what this is. And so I thought it was good. And I was like, I wish that this show was out when I was running my group, because I would have definitely recommended it, because it puts it in a different way versus when you go to perinatal therapy, which sounds kind of clinical and like, I don't even know what that is. So I think it's very important to normalize those feelings. People probably have been having these feelings for, 50 years, but because it wasn't recognized, it's kind of like, there's something wrong with me. So I'm glad that we are talking more about this type of therapy, because it's absolutely needed, because babies are born every day and we want to help them out. I actually wish that there was a therapist like you at our center during that time, because although we were running the group, it was very like surface level, and we didn't get a chance to kind of go on that deeper level at the end of the day when they're going home and there's multiple things going on within their relationship, their life, first time having a pregnancy, or not having getting pregnant but not having the father around, different, like so many different emotions that are going on, where I definitely think this is definitely needed for people that need these type of services.
Yeah, I agree.
So this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I don't see any comments. So if there's anybody that has anything they want to say, they want to comment, let us know. Again, I know this is that subject where it's like, should I say something? Should I not? We haven't had a whole lot of comments on here, but I know this is a subject that people are talking about all the time. So if you have any more questions, comments, let us know. If not, I want to let Valon know how we can reach her if anybody's interested in what she does. So you can let us know again what you do. And then how people can reach you, or if you have any services that if they were interested in, let us know about that.
Okay, well, thank you. So again, I am a clinical worker, sex educator, sex therapist based in Durham, North Carolina. Full-time work I work with. And then I also consult with the UNC School of Medicine Women's Mood Disorders Program. And so in my spare time, I recently established a business called Vitality Wellness Solutions, where I focus on sexuality and sexual health. And so I'm not seeing therapy patients with Vitality Wellness right now, but really focusing on sex education. And in the age of Corona, a lot of that is virtual right now, but whether it's a virtual ladies night or just a meeting, I hope to offer soon some CEU or continuing education unit trainings for social workers. I'm licensed in the District of Columbia as well as North Carolina. And so I know it's easy to hop on a self-paced 1-hour webinar, learn about a particular issue, and get your CEU for your license renewal. And so really open to working with organizations, whether you have a youth group, a church group, your own kids, one-on-ones, and really just kind of talking about anything sexual health. I mean, I have talked about things I didn't even know were things. And I was like, oh, okay, we can talk about that. But really all things sexually related. And so you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Vitality Wellness Solutions, PLLC is Facebook, Vitality Wellness Solutions on Instagram. And then if you would like to reach me, you can always reach me here on Valon Alford on Facebook. But you can also just email me, and that's vitalitywellnesssolutions@gmail.com. And so if you reach out, even if it's a question, definitely respect confidentiality. So can't guarantee that I will answer them because they are consultations, but I may be able to make a post or a blog or just get on live and answer questions. People reach out to me all the time. And a lot of things, I mean, it kind of reminds me of, being a new social worker, because I'm like, sometimes people ask questions. I'm like, I don't know, and so, but it's always intriguing because then I go and research or learn, and it's like, oh, okay, like Yeah, no, you can actually use that with that or, and things like that. So please reach out if you have questions, suggestions. Also, I'm doing this, I'm starting a book club. um I used to like to read and I still read a lot, but I don't read for fun as much. It's usually a case report or a blog or just something quick. But my colleague Dr. Erica Simpson Clay, she's an OBGYN who I met at our sexual health certificate program at the University of Michigan, and she recommended this book called The Vagina Bible, and it's written by another OBGYN. And so it really just is all things related to the vagina and the vulva. And so the book is around 400 pages. I think it was like $18.99 at Barnes and Noble. So for the month of June, I'm going to be doing this book club. And some point, probably this week, because June is tomorrow. So I will sort of put out a schedule, and it'll be probably weekly. I don't know if I'm going to do Wednesday or evening or Saturday morning, but a virtual book club. There'll be a book, a Zoom link, and or I may do it on Facebook. I will figure that part out. But get the book. It's called The Vagina Bible. I'm going to be reading that. Then we'll just have some talk. So you, me, and whomever in the World Wide Web who decides to read it with us. But I'll just be facilitating a conversation about what we're learning, what was interesting, like how does that relate to us in real life. And so that is what I'm doing for June.
Okay, that sounds super awesome. I would like to thank Valon for coming on with me. She is my last chat. I have had 3 other people in our mental health awareness month, and this has been so awesome. I feel like I want to keep these up. I normally talk about, if you all know me, you guys know I'm in the travel world. I often talk about travel all the time, but I think a lot of people don't know is I am a social worker. First and foremost, that's where all my loan debt is from. So, yeah. So
okay.
we keep that in the background. We mentioned that, right? Exactly. That's another conversation. But we mentioned we are both Howard alum from the Howard University School of Social Work, which is where I met Valon. We actually met in what group was it?
Student council.
Yes, student council. I was the first year. Valon was second year, and who knew that I would be president the second year? I guess when we talk about stuff being interconnected, I was interconnected. I had no idea that was going to occur.
Girl, you know what? I forgot about that. I can't even believe. I mean, I was still that was a great experience though.
Right.
And it's hard to believe, like for me, like South Africa, because I was in that first group that went to South Africa. That was 10 years ago this year. 10 years ago, March.
Yes, that we let's go travel related for a second before we leave here.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely. We went to South Africa. I went in 2000. So we graduated 2012. So 2012 I went. You probably went in 2011. What happens is a School of Social Work, we have the week during spring break, they take students. It was free for us at the time. 10 days to South Africa, Cape Town. I'm very appreciative of that particular experience. As the president, I had an automatic shoe-in. So shout out to that School of Social Work president feature that I was able to go to South Africa. It was super, super cool to go. And we want to, again, shout out them for that particular opportunity because I've always been interested in international social work, Valon. I don't know if you know that. That is still one of my goals. I haven't made it happen yet, but it's going to happen. So it kind of started off because we got a chance to go back and go to some of the sites in South Africa, and we got to see how they do social work. And so it was very interesting to kind of see those. And we had a little bit of a fun as well. I went to a safari, different things like that. So I am super excited to have met Valon there. And Valon, let's keep in contact. Let's do this more often. I would love to do another session. I don't know where, when, or how. I've never been to North Carolina either. I've been to South Carolina. We dropped my sister off at college. Last
you have to visit North Carolina, girl. Come on up the street.
I know. I had another friend that lived there, and I was like, if I was by myself, I sure would have shot over to North Carolina.
Yes.
Yes, we also have a Diamond. Hey, Diamond. Diamond says HBCU grads represented. We are representing today. Yes, we need to have more. We love our HBCU. I love Howard. Have to give out keep giving a shout out to them. I went to PWI for undergrad, and then I went to so we have that experience. So the 2 different experiences, but experiences nonetheless.
Oh, girl, that's a whole other. We can do 2 hours on that.
Right. We could literally probably talk all day about so many different things. So Diamond says she's from is it Shaney University graduate? Is that in New York, Diamond? Or where is that at? Let us know what college that is at. But yeah, it's always exciting when we could connect as Black people in higher education. Like that's what it's all about. And it's also interesting to see what fields have we been in since then. And to see us doing our own practices and doing our own consultations and different things like that. So I'm excited to break into that realm. I applied for a grant, so hopefully I'll get that grant, but it was a mental health grant. So I'm super excited. If I get it, I'll talk to you more about it. We can talk offline about it.
About dude, that is so exciting. I need me some money because I really want to do more programming. And what I'm learning is, and shout out to anyone who is an entrepreneur. And thank goodness that I have a full-time job and a part-time job. But even with those, aside from finding and making the time, I'm using my own money for everything. And so I really want to be able to, like, even with the CEU events, like I'm learning so much behind the scenes of like getting the CEU approval to setting it up so that it can be passive and people can just go on my site and click on it, take the training and, making sure I have a quality camera, making sure my bundles look good. So I'm just like, there's just so much.
Let me talk about Valon in a second. We were supposed to do this yesterday. Valon told me, I got to go get my hair done, but we can move this to Sunday. It looked good though, girl. I see you. We ain't gonna talk about. I'm gonna tell them myself really quickly. We getting way off topic, but it's okay. These braids. We talk about traveling, Valon. These braids are from Ghana in January. I still have my braids up.
Okay, you know what? And we are, but let me just say, when I went to South Africa, maybe I had a weave in my hair. I don't know. I think I went there with a weave. Do you know I got my hair braided in the village, and it just made me feel like I just knew it was like me and God in Africa in that time. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, because at the time, I was ignorant. So, here it's like, oh, you go to the African shop and get your hair done. It's like, Africa is a big old continent. I couldn't tell you where they were from or anything. But now, obviously I know. But, when I was there, I was just like, I'm getting African braids in Africa. But that just took me out. And I was going to actually go back. So Dr. Lucinda Quay Doyle, who actually helped to curate.
Were you going to go on a trip? You were going to go.
Yeah, so she is an international social worker, and so make sure you are connecting with her, especially as you talk about getting that grant and stuff. But Lucinda is well versed in international social work. She's curated these international trips professionally for different universities, and so she was going to have a social work. I think it was a week or 2 week trip to Ghana in August, and really just have time for some cultural immersion, some social work engagement. And anyway, Corona didn't mess that up. But next year, if it happens, I will be there.
Corona messed up a lot of stuff. Lucinda did reach out to me because, as you know, we just came back from Ghana in December for the year of the return. And if Rona doesn't mess up our plans again, we're headed back in August. So let us know, anybody, if you want to go on any of these trips. And history tidbit, Diamond went to Shaney University Graduate School. It was founded in 1837, and it was the first historically Black institution of higher learning. So you learn something new every day. We talked about sex and perinatal therapy, but we giving you some HBC history in the house right now. So you are getting a little bit of everything. But again, this was so wonderful. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope that you got some information, tidbits. Again, follow Valon. Again, you can follow me. I'm on Instagram at Sweet Tippies, Twitter's at Sweet Tippies. I have a travel blog, and check me out at www.tiffany-travels.com. I host group trips. I was supposed to be on a trip to Colombia before Rona hit next week.
Girl, you were booked and busy. Okay, I'm calling you for a consultation. But before we go, I want to give a shout out. I see Penny Miller. She also is our colleague from the School of Social Work. She shared a watch party. So thanks for tuning in.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Yes, I got a chance to see Penny while I was down in South Carolina.
Look at y'all. Okay.
So we were able to connect, and so that was super cool to catch up with her. And then when I was in South Carolina, I invited her out to one of our other colleagues' birthday party when she moved back to DC. So we are all intertwined in
And
here.
that's what I love about it. Like, no matter where we are, what we do, we're always a Facebook message, a text, we're always interconnected or able to access each other. So I love that.
Absolutely. So Diamond says, yes, we can talk about sex and history. Absolutely. They're totally related. We can talk about the history of sex and
all of
everything
it.
and travel and all that kind of stuff. But this was so much fun. I have not talked to Valon in forever, so this was like an old catch up. But we
got another couple hours in us, so
we're gonna let you go. We're gonna end this broadcast. Me and Valon will probably keep the conversation up after we end the broadcast, but we are going to let you go. Again, I hope you had a wonderful time. You can check this out on the YouTube channel. It's also streaming live to YouTube right now. That channel is called Where in the Herd is Tiffany. You get it? My name is Tiffany Heard. We had that little play on words going on. So check that out because there's a lot of travel content on the YouTube channel. But I also wanted to start showcasing the other side of me, which is that social work piece. So I'm going to be streaming these conversations live to Facebook from now on because I want people to see who I am. I'm not just about travel. I'm not just about social work. There are so many parts to me, and I think these conversations are important. Whether you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, therapy is important across the board. And in this particular time, we absolutely need it. So I just want you to know that if nobody ever tells you that they love you, you are loved on today.
Yes, you are.
I want you to have a wonderful evening and have a good rest of the day and stay safe out there in these streets. All right, y'all. Indeed. Talk to y'all later.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We'll do it again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.